So here we have a picture of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Memran. It's really a hard-working man who has produced something that's absolutely, I think, in this book, so far as I've read it, is phenomenal. The first part is to tell us about how our mind works and the difference between ourselves, who we really are, and our emotional mind that is constantly thinking. That's what he points out there, how to look at it, how to listen to the thoughts, move to a higher level. Then he goes to the concept, and that's where we're at right now, and I don't find it particularly easy to understand, but on the other hand, because he's coining words as he's going through, in other words, he's making up, these are tremendous kedushim, that he's helping us with using physics and modern science to explain this. So let's go over here. This is where we're at. And we know, and anybody who listens to other shiurim that we do, particularly in the Riyah Kodesh, is talking about kavanah, about kavanos. And actually what is we are aiming at. So let's talk about, he says, the power of intention, of kavanah. Let's read this a little bit here. In order to connect to his higher light. Okay, I'm here on the ground saying the shir, and you are on the ground listening to it, God willing. But there is a higher panemius to us, which is eternal. So in order to do this, to connect to this light, one must understand that the nefesh, and here he means the general concept of the spirituality within us, is a simple spiritual entity, which is drawn to what is similar to itself. So here he says spiritual fires. I'm not sure what that meant, and this is coming from the Chovos HaLevavos, if he means passion. And it naturally distances itself from what is opposite to it. Material bodies, materialism. So it seems like, to me, it means like the spiritual entity is expansive. Because it has no particular form. It has no form, it's something else, but he describes it as some kind of a fire. On the other hand, physicality is the opposite of that. He says it's material. It's not on fire. It's condensed. Now those are some of my words, but let's see what Rabbi Mimran tells me. So this little piece that he's doing here is full of all kinds of secrets, and the thing is that how many times can you read this? You get more. So it says Adam's original body is said to have been similar in appearance to the angels. Angels are pure thought forms. Listen to that. Because he had said before that the fifth dimension is thought. So angels are pure thought forms composed of hyper-light particles. So what hyper means, it means excessive, I don't know if he means light, but I guess he means particles of light that are moving in some kind of hyper way, existing in the fifth dimension. Now I take this to mean that they're moving very fast, because yesterday he said that the speed of thought is faster than the speed of light. The value of thought here gives us insight as to why the Torah places such strong emphasis on thought and intent. And prayer, in performing the ritual commandments, our thoughts create things. But he says it creates them in the fifth dimension, in a non-physical but thought-oriented dimension. A shift of essence from hyperlight to sublight. So he means by speed here. He said because white light we know is composed of waves. So a hyperlight to sublight speed should not be a foreign concept to us. Heat equals speed of movement. So when things are hot, it means they're hyper. They're moving fast. In other words, the more a molecular structure of a thing vibrates, so those vibrations is what he calls about the speed, the hotter that mass becomes, then the thing becomes hotter. He gives us an example. The opposite is also true. The slower something goes, the colder it becomes. So he's saying that Adam Rishon became colder. The known example of this is H2O, which is 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 of water, which means water, which we know as water, When water is between the temperatures of 0 and 100 degrees Celsius, it exists in a liquid state. Below 0 degrees Celsius, the molecular structure of water slows down to become solid ice. At the temperature above 100 degrees Celsius, liquid water turns into a gas form, which is called steam. Now, eventually, you can hyperheat that steam. It can be heated until it further becomes something called plasma. Now, here, once again, we're in the realm of physics, but it's important. Plasma is a type of matter that isn't simply gas, yet it is not pure energy. So it's a result of the energy being heated and speeded up. So as it is with water, so it is with the human body, and thus all of mankind, whose bodies are made up of approximately 60% water. The result of incongruent movement in the dimension of thought. Now, let's hear this again. I think it means his sin. So in other words, the thought preceded the action. So he says the incongruent movement in the dimension of thought, which is the fifth dimension, led Adam's essence to slow to such an extent, in other words, his thinking process at the incipience of his reality. Now, this is a little bit of the thought he's saying here. He's saying that the mind and the thinking precedes physicality, that it changed itself from light to mass. In other words, Adam Rishon was originally light, and he was moving at a speed that was tremendously fast, but he slowed down because he uses the word, the incongruity of his thinking. It didn't match that speed anymore. It caused it to slow down. Instead of being like an angel, Adam became like a monkey, comparatively speaking. Yet it appears that our energy side only became encased in an outer shell of matter. So therefore, he meant to say that the energy of the spiritual world, or that he used the word nefesh before, let's say, I like the word neshama a little bit better, in an outer shell of matter is that this energy is contained within something physical, but it's only a shell. This is the relationship of body and soul. Matter is ever changing. Atoms are continuously forming new molecular structures. So it seems that whatever energy field we call the soul, so he's saying now here the soul, or the neshama, is a field of energy. It only has a temporary ability to project a cohesive element to the molecules that form our physical bodies. In other words, it has an impermanent, I think that's the right word, a not permanent relationship with our physical bodies. It makes a penetration, but it's not continuous. So he calls it a cohesive element. Yet at some point, this cohesive ability either breaks down or intentionally has within it a type of self-destruct mechanism. So the energy is inside of the body, and somehow there's a self-destruct mechanism. This is the aging process. I'm sorry to say that I am aging, and I'm beginning to the realization that I'm actually becoming old. So this is the aging process. It results in the inevitable death of the physical body. Now, we have a little bit more to do, and I don't know if I'm going to do this in one shiur. I'll do it in two. I'll do it in one. So he said from a Kabbalistic tradition, though, it does not seem that the process is absolute. Now, I don't know exactly what he's talking about, because I think here he's talking about aging and ultimately death. We have two examples of humans who have transcended the physical plane by transforming into light bodies. In other words, they turn themselves into complete energy. These two are Enoch and Eliyahu Hanavi, both spoken about in the Torah, which we deal with, the Torah talks about them. The change itself from being a physical body itself is a rather interesting one, or according to Kabbalistic legend, their bodies were turned into fire. Now, fire is heat. Heat means that they were moving at a rate that is much faster than the rate at which human beings and all of our parts vibrate. Now, one knows that if one's flesh were to combust, one would burn to death. So it can't be the kind of fire that burns your body. Therefore, this is some type of fire, yet if the transference of energy of matter into energy is performed by the speeding up of molecular structure to the speed of light and beyond, this generates a large amount of heat. Now let me read this again because it's not that easy for me to understand. He says, therefore, since that there is a way beyond, I guess, physical burning to death, so there must be some type of fire, yet if the transfer of matter into energy, so in other words, you set the matter is going to be turned into fire, is performed by the speeding up of molecular structure to the speed of light and beyond, it's going to generate a large amount of heat. This is most likely the reason why angels and other entities of that nature are said to possess bodies that glow like brass or gold. Their forms are not made of matter as we know it, but rather of pure energy, congealing in an appropriate form for the sake of their individual earthly mission. Now let me stop here for a second, try to grasp what I think he was saying. I think that what these words mean is that if the transformation was a transformation that involved the destruction of the body, then of course there would be no life afterward. So instead, it's a transfer of matter into just pure energy, which is another way of saying, like, say, pure soul. Now we're down here on this word. Such form is discarded once the entity returns to its dimensional plane of existence. Now this, I'm thinking of Eliyahu Navi, that he is like just a ball of energy, but it can condense. It has the ability to go both ways. Such a case is mentioned in Tanakh, referring to an angel that visited the parents of Shimshon. Remember that story, that a Jewish judge who would possess tremendous strength, once the angel finished his message, Scripture mentions how the angel disappeared in a puff of smoke. Now, let me see if I can get this lined up a little bit better here. So he said, standard human intelligence, the way we think, does not conceive of matterless forms of pure energy. Now, this is a way to say this. We are only physical. So if you wanted to tell me that there was an independent form of pure energy, it would be very hard for me to see that. See, that he says these are constructs of thought existing in the fifth dimensional plane. Yesterday, and I'm always thinking about the Baba Sali because I had a teacher who was Talmid Mofchak of the Baba Sali, and he wrote so many books about the miracles of the Baba Sali. Because the Baba Sali could take certain names that he knew and picture certain kinds of attachments of those names in his mind of different situations. That's my understanding what he saw there. He didn't mention the Baba Sali, for example, or any other, but he did mention Tzaddikim. Yet these energies exist up and above our awareness. They are there, but the frequency of which these energies are moving is beyond us, which are constructs of thought existing in the fifth dimensional plane. Now he's talking here that the origin of action of our physicality really is in the fifth dimension, in the dimension of thought, which also moves in the speed and is a construct at the beginning of the water, the flow of the energy of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu. So again, yet these entities exist up and above our awareness, our lack of. We have no awareness of them because the speed at which they move is not our speed. So he says when interacting with these entities, one must project a type of visage through their natural medium of the mental plane. So if you want to interact with this, it's going to be on the level of pure thought. So thinking before about what this could be like if a person actually wanted to come so close to Hashem, by coming close to these spiritual energies, it has to be started mental. It starts there. And that's why Rabbi Mimran wanted to talk to beginnings about what he called the emotional ego. Because if everything that we are is only concentrating on what we feel about the particular thing that's going on at the time, and we get around and around and around on that, then we'll never get to a state like this. It is only in this way that average humans are able to cognize non-matter forms of life. Thought. The Uri can teach you a little bit about what to think about. Thus, when one of these entities appears, like Eliyahu Navi, it actually is harmonizing, slowing its vibrational frequency of whatever forms a particular strings and forms that forms its existence. So its frequency is able to slow down. So he said, an appropriate match within the individual's subjective mind. Now you got to think about this. The mind is everything. It is possible that the frequency of our thinking could match the frequency of this non-physical energy. Such an entity does not need to take on mass and thus slow down its personal modulation to that point. It simply communicates with the human in that one dimension that we share, which is the realm of thought. As mentioned earlier, the proof that radio waves and other such frequencies exist is because we have the necessary instruments, such as we have radios, we have mobile phones, we have all these different kinds of devices that can measure waves and look at waves, that can detect them. So we can always be considered as devices. So the same thing is true by us. We also can tune ourselves and work on tuning ourselves, and this is the concept of the kavanos. This is the real secret of the kavanos. Is by tuning our mind, by saying the prayers and by working on the prayers. We'll learn a little bit more here and learn a little bit more there, by which communication with angels, souls, and the like actually is possible. So let's leave the blurb. I can read the blurb at the bottom. It says, angels simply communicate with the human in that one dimension which we share, the realm of thought. Interesting idea. This is Baruch Fleischman for the Tikkun Elevator Kollel.